a set of statistics, and I look forward to you showing up on all pieces of this legislation, all of you, showing up on all pieces of legislation to keep our children safe. Mr. Zuckerberg, I want to come back to you. I talked with you about being a parent to a young child who doesn't have a phone, doesn't, is not on social media at all. And one of the things that I am deeply concerned with as a parent to a young Black girl is the utilization of filters on your platform that would suggest to young girls utilizing your platform the evidence that they are not good enough as they are. I want to ask more specifically and refer to some unredacted court documents that reveal that your own researchers concluded that these face filters that mimic plastic surgery negatively impact youth mental health indeed, and well-being. Why should we believe that because that you are going to do more to protect young women and young girls when it is that you give them the tools to affirm the self-hate that is spewed across your platforms? Why is it that we should believe that you are committed to doing anything more to keep our children safe?
Sorry, there's a lot to unpack there.
There
we
is
give
a lot.
people tools to express themselves in different ways, and people use face filters and different tools to make media and photos and videos that are fun or interesting across a lot of the different products that are
Plastic surgery pens are good tools to express creativity.
Senator, I'm not speaking to
Skin lightening tools are tools
Senator,
to express creativity. This is the direct thing that I'm asking
about.
I'm
not defending any specific one of those. I think that the ability to kind of filter and edit images is generally a useful tool for expression. For that specifically, I'm not familiar with the study that you're referring to, but we did make it so that we're not recommending this type of content to teens.
I made no reference to a study, to court documents that revealed your knowledge of the impact of these types of filters on young people generally, young girls in particular.
Senator, I disagree with that characterization. I think that there have been hypotheses.
Court documents?
I haven't seen any document.
Oh, okay, Mr. Zuckerberg, my time is up. I hope that you hear what is being offered to you and are prepared to step up and do better. I know this Senate committee is going to do our work to hold you in to greater account. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here. I don't feel like I'm going to have an opportunity to ask a lot of questions, so I'm going to reserve the right to submit some for the record. But I have heard, we've had hearings like this before. I've been in the Senate for 9 years. I've heard hearings like this before. I've heard horrible stories about people who have died, committed suicide, been embarrassed. Every year, we have an annual flogging every year. And what materially has occurred over the last 9 years? Do any of you all, just yes or no question, do any of y'all participate in an industry consortium trying to make this fundamentally safe across platforms? Yes or no, Mr. Zuckerberg?
Yes.
There's a variety of organizations.
Do you participate in them?
Which organizations?
I should say, does anyone here not participate in an industry? I actually think it would be immoral for you all to consider it a strategic advantage to keep safe or to keep private something that would secure all these platforms to avoid this sort of problem. Do you all agree with that? That anybody that would be saying you want ours because ours is the safest and these haven't figured out the secret sauce, that you as an industry realize this is an existential threat to you all if we don't get it right, right? I mean, you've got to secure your platforms. You got to deal with this. Do you not have an inherent mandate to do this? Because it would seem to me if you don't, you're going to cease to exist. I mean, we could regulate you out of business if we wanted to. And the reason I'm saying it may sound like a criticism, it's not a criticism. I think we have to understand that there should be an inherent motivation for you to get this right. Our Congress will make a decision that could potentially put you out of business. Here's the reason I have a concern with that, though. I just went on the internet while I was listening intently to all the other members speaking, and I found a dozen different platforms outside the United States, 10 of which are in China, 2 of which are in Russia. Their daily average subscribe or active membership numbers in the billions. Well, people say you can't get on China's version of TikTok. It took me one quick search on my favorite search engine to find out exactly how I could get an account on this platform today. And so the other thing that we have to keep in mind, I come from technology. I could figure out, ladies and gentlemen, I could figure out how to influence your kid without them ever being on a social media platform. I can randomly send text and get a bite and then find out an email address and get compromising information. It is horrible to hear some of these stories, and I have shared and I've had these stories occur in my hometown down in North Carolina. But if we only come here and make a point today and don't start focusing on making a difference, which requires people to stop shouting and start listening and start passing language here, the bad actors are just going to be off our shores. I have another question for you all. How many people roughly, if you don't know the exact numbers, okay, roughly how many people do you have looking 24 hours a day at these horrible images? And just go real quick with an answer down the line and filtering it out.
It's most of the 40,000 about people who work on safety.
And again,
We have 2,300 people all over the world.
okay.
We have 40,000 trust and safety professionals around the world.
We have approximately 2,000 people dedicated to trust and safety and content moderation.
Our platform is much smaller than these folks. We have hundreds of people, and it's looking at content, and 15% of our workforce.
I'm only
focused
mentioning
on
these
it.
people have a horrible job. Many of them experience, they have to get counseling for all the things they see. We have evil people out there. And we're not going to fix this by shouting past or talking past each other. We're going to fix this by every one of y'all being at the table and hopefully coming closer to what I heard one person say, supporting a lot of the good bills, like one that I hope Senator Blackburn mentions when she gets a chance to talk. But guys, if you're not at the table and securing these platforms, you're going to be on it. And the reason why I'm not okay with that is that if we ultimately destroy your ability to create value and drive you out of business, the evil people will find another way to get to these children. And I do have to admit, I don't think my mom's watching this one, but there is good. We can't look past good that is occurring. My mom, who lives in Nashville, Tennessee, and I talked yesterday, and we talked about a Facebook post that she made a couple of days ago. We don't let her talk to anybody else. That connects my 92-year-old mother with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. That lets a kid who may feel awkward in school to get into a group of people and relate to people. Let's not throw out the good because we haven't all together focused on rooting out the bad. Now, I guarantee you, I could go through some of your governance documents and find a reason to flog every single one of you because you didn't place the emphasis on it that I think you should. But at the end of the day, I find it hard to believe that any of you people started this business, some of you in your college dorm rooms, for the purposes of creating the evil that is being perpetrated on your platforms. But I hope that every single waking hour, you're doing everything you can to reduce it. You're not going to be able to eliminate it. And I hope that there are some enterprising young tech people out there today that are going to go to parents and say, ladies and gentlemen, your children have a deadly weapon. They have a potentially deadly weapon, whether it's a phone or a tablet. You have to secure it. You can't assume that they're going to be honest and say that they're 16 when they're 12. We all have to recognize that we have a responsibility to play, and you guys are at the tip of the spear. So I hope that we can get to a point to where we are moving these bills. If you got a problem with them, state your problem. Let's fix it. No is not an answer. And know that I want the United States to be the beacon for innovation, to be the beacon for safety, and to prevent people from using other options that have existed since the internet has existed to exploit people. And count me in as somebody that will try and help out. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tillis. Next is Senator Ossoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses today. Mr. Zuckerberg, I want to begin by just asking a simple question, which is, do you want kids to use your platform more or less?
Well, we don't want people under the age of 13 using.
Do you
our
want teenagers 13 and up to use your platform more or less?
Well, we would like to build a product that is useful and that people want to use more.
My time is going to be limited, so it's just, do you want them to use it more or less? Teenagers 13 to 17 years old, do you want them using Meta products more or less?
I'd like them to be useful enough that they want to use them more.
You want them to use it more? I think herein we have one of the fundamental challenges. In fact, you have a fiduciary obligation, do you not, to try to get kids to use your platform more?
It depends on how you define that. We obviously are a business.
I'm sorry, Mr. Zuckerberg, our time is, it's self-evident that you have a fiduciary obligation to get your users, including users under 18, to use and engage with your platform more rather than less, correct?
Over the long term, but in the near term, we often take a lot of steps, including we made a change to show less videos that on the platform that reduced amount of time by more than 50 million
Okay,
hours.
but if your shareholders ask you, Mark, I wouldn't, Mr. Zuckerberg here, but your shareholders might be on a first name basis with you. Mark, are you trying to get kids to use Meta products more or less? You'd say more, right?
Well, I would say that over the long term, we're trying to
Yeah.
create the most
I mean,
value
let's look,
possible.
so the 10K you file with the SEC, a few things I want to note. Here are some quotes, and this is a filing that you signed, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Our financial performance has been and will continue to be significantly determined by our success in adding, retaining, and engaging active users. Here's another quote. If our users decrease their level of engagement with our products, our revenue, financial results, and business may be significantly harmed. Here's another quote. We believe that some users, particularly younger users, are aware of and actively engaging with other products and services similar to or as a substitute for ours. Continues, in the event that users increasingly engage with other products and services, we may experience a decline in use and engagement in key demographics or more broadly, in which case our business would likely be harmed. You have an obligation as the chief executive to encourage your team to get kids to use your platform more.
Senator,
Fundamental,
I think this is.
is that not self-evident? You have
Well,
a
Senator,
fiduciary
I think
obligation
it's
to your
not-
shareholders to get kids to use your platform more.
I think that the thing that's not intuitive is the direction is to make the products more useful, so that way people want to use them more. We don't give the teams running the Instagram feed or the Facebook feed a goal to increase the amount of time that people spend.
Yeah, but
We
you
give
don't
people
dispute,
goals.
and your 10K makes clear you want your users engaging more and using more the platform. And I think this gets to the root of the challenge because it's the overwhelming view of the public, certainly in my home state of Georgia, and we've had some discussions about the underlying science, that this platform is harmful for children. I mean, you are familiar with, and not just your platform, by the way, social media in general. 2023 report from the Surgeon General about the impact of social media on kids' mental health, which cited evidence that kids who spend more than 3 hours a day on social media have double the risk of poor mental health outcomes, including depression and anxiety. You're familiar with that Surgeon General report and the underlying study?
I read the report, yes.
Do you dispute it?
No, but I think it's important to characterize it correctly. I think what he was flagging in the report is that there seems to be a correlation, and obviously the mental health issue is very important, so it's something that needs to be
Yeah, we
studied
know.
further.
The thing is, that's everyone knows there's a correlation. Everyone knows that kids who spend a lot of time, too much time on your platforms are at risk. And it's not just the mental health issues. I mean, let me ask you a question. Is your platform safe for kids?
I believe it is, but there's an
Hold on a
important
second.
difference between
Let me
correlation
ask
and causation.
because we're not going to be able to get anywhere. We want to work in a productive, open, honest, and collaborative way with the private sector to pass legislation that will protect Americans, that will protect American children above all, and that will allow businesses to thrive in this country. If we don't start with an open, honest, candid, realistic assessment of the issues, we can't do that. The first point is you want kids to use the platform more. In fact, you have an obligation to. But if you're not willing to acknowledge that it's a dangerous place for children, the internet is a dangerous place for children, not just your platform, isn't it? Isn't the internet a dangerous place for children?
I think it can be. Yeah, there's both great things that people can do and there are harms that we need to work to
Yeah,
mitigate.
it's a dangerous place for children. There are families here who have lost their children. There are families across the country whose children have engaged in self-harm, who have experienced low self-esteem, who have been sold deadly pills on the internet. The internet's a dangerous place for children, and your platforms are dangerous places for children. Do you agree?
I think that there are harms that we need to work
Just-
to mitigate.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not gonna, I think overall.
Why not?
there-
Why not? Why not just acknowledge it? Why do we have to do the very
Well,
careful
I
code?
disagree with the characterization.
Which character,
you
that,
have.
that the internet's a dangerous place for children?
I think you're trying to characterize our products as inherently dangerous, and I think that
Inherent
First
or
of-
not, your products are places where children can experience harm. They can experience harm to their mental health. They can be sold drugs. They can be preyed upon by predators. They're dangerous places. And yet you have an obligation to promote the use of these platforms by children. And look, all I'm trying to suggest to you, Mr. Zuckerberg, and my time is running short, is that in order for you to succeed, you and your colleagues here, we have to acknowledge these basic truths. We have to be able to come before the American people, the American public, the people in my state of Georgia, and acknowledge the internet is dangerous, including your platforms. There are predators lurking. There are drugs being sold. There are harms to mental health that are taking a huge toll on kids' quality of life. And yet you have this incentive, not just you, Mr. Zuckerberg, all of you have an incentive to boost, maximize use, utilization, and engagement. And that is where public policy has to step in to make sure that these platforms are safe for kids. So kids are not dying, so kids are not overdosing, so kids are not cutting themselves or killing themselves because they're spending all day scrolling instead of playing outside. And I appreciate all of you for your testimony. We will continue to engage as we develop this legislation. Thank you.
Senator from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to each of you for coming. And I know some of you had to be subpoenaed to get here, but we do appreciate that you all are here. Mr. Chu, I want to come to you first. We've heard that you're looking at putting a headquarters in Nashville and likewise in Silicon Valley and Seattle. And what you're going to find probably is that the welcome mat is not going to be rolled out for you in Nashville like it would be in California. There are a lot of people in Tennessee that are very concerned about the way TikTok is basically building dossiers on our kids, the way they are building those on their virtual you. And also that information is held in China, in Beijing, as you responded to Senator Blumenthal and I last year in reference to that question. And we also know that a major music label yesterday said they were pulling all of their content off your site because of your issues on payment, on artificial intelligence, and because of the negative impact on our kids' mental health. So we will see how that progresses. Mr. Zuckerberg, I want to come to you. We have just had Senator Blumenthal and I, of course, have had some internal documents and emails that have come our way. One of the things that really concerned me is that you referred to your young users in terms of their lifetime value of being roughly $270 per teenager. And each of you should be looking at these kids. Their T-shirts they're wearing today say, I'm worth more than $270. We've got some standing up in those T-shirts. Now, and some of the children from our state, some of the children, the parents that we have worked with, just to think whether it is Becca Schmidt, David Mollick, Sarah Flatt, Annalie Schote, would you say that life is only worth $270? What could possibly lead you? I mean, I listened to that. I know you're a dad. I'm a mom. I'm a grandmom. And how could you possibly even have that thought? It is astounding to me. And I think this is one of the reasons that states, 42 states are now suing you because of features that they consider to be addictive, that you are pushing forward. And in the emails that we've got from 2021 that go from August to November, there is the staff plan that is being discussed. And Antigone Davis, Nick Clegg, Sheryl Sandberg, Chris Cox, Alex Schultz, Adam Asseri are all on this chain of emails on the well-being plan. And then we get to one, Nick did email Mark for emphasis to emphasize his support for the package, but it sounds like it lost out to various other pressures and priorities. See, this is what bothers us. Children are not your priority. Children are your product. Children you see as a way to make money. And children, protecting children in this virtual space, you made a conscious decision. Even though Nick Clegg and others were going through the process of saying, this is what we do. These documents are really illuminating. And it just shows me that growing this business, expanding your revenue, what you were going to put on those quarterly filings, that was the priority. The children were not. It's very clear. I want to talk with you about the pedophile ring because that came up earlier and the Wall Street Journal reported on that. And one of the things that we found out was after that became evident, then you didn't take that content down. And it was content that showed that teens were for sale and were offering themselves to older men. And you didn't take it down because it didn't violate your community standards. Do you know how often a child is bought or sold for sex in this country? Every 2 minutes. Every 2 minutes, a child is bought or sold for sex. That's not my stat. That is a TBI stat. Now, finally, this content was taken down after a congressional staffer went to Meta's global head of safety. So would you please explain to me and to all these parents why explicit predatory content does not violate your platform's terms of service or your community standards?
Sure, Senator. Let me try to address all of the things that you just said. It does violate our standards. We work very hard to take it down.
Didn't take it down.
We've reported, I think it's more than 26 million examples of this kind of content.
Didn't take it down until a congressional staffer brought it up.
It may be that in this case, we made a mistake and missed something.
I think you make a lot of mistakes. So let's move
leading
on.
teams that
I want to
identify more
talk
than-
with you about your Instagram creators program and about the push. We found out through these documents that you actually are pushing forward because you want to bring kids in early. You see these younger teenagers as valuable, but an untapped audience, quoting from the emails, and suggesting teens are actually household influencers to bring their younger siblings into your platform, into Instagram. Now, how can you ensure that Instagram creators, your product, your program, does not facilitate illegal activities when you fail to remove content pertaining to the sale of minors? And it is happening once every 2 minutes in this country.
Senator, our tools for identifying that kind of content are industry leading. That doesn't mean we're perfect. There are definitely issues that we have, but we continue to
Mr.
invest a ton in
Zuckerberg,
it. I think-
yes, there
and-
are a lot that is slipping through. It appears that you're trying to be the premier sex trafficking
Of course
site
not, Senator.
in this
Senator,
country.
that's ridiculous.
No,
S-
it
Senator,
is not
of
ridiculous. You
course
want
we
to
don't
turn
want
around
this-
and
we
tell
don't want
these
this
people
content on
that,
our platforms, and
why don't you take it down?
we do take it
We
down.
are here discussing,
we
we
do more
need
work to
you
take it
all
down
to
than-
work
than-
with
than-
us. No, you're not.
I-
You are not. And the problem is, we've been working on this. Senator Welch is over there. We've been working on this stuff for a decade. You have an army of lawyers and lobbyists that have fought us on this every step of the way. You work with Net Choice, the Cato Institute, Taxpayers Protection Alliance, and Chamber of Progress to actually fight our bipartisan legislation to keep kids safe online. So are you going to stop funding these groups? Are you going to stop lobbying against this and come to the table and work with us? Yes or no?
Senator, we have a.
Yes or no?
Of course, we'll work with you on the legislation.
Okay,
I mean,
the
it's been
door
hard
is
to-
open. We've got all these bills. You need to come to the table. Each and every one of you need to come to the table, and you need to work with us. Kids are dying.
Senator Welch?
I want to thank my colleague, Senator Blackburn, for her decade of work on this. I actually have some optimism. There is a consensus today that didn't exist, say, 10 years ago, that there is a profound threat to children, to mental health, to safety. There's not a dispute. That was in debate before. That's a starting point. Secondly, we're identifying concrete things that can be done in 4 different areas. One is industry standards. 2 is legislation. 3 are the courts. And then 4 is a proposal that Senator Bennett, Senator Graham, myself, and Senator Warren have to establish an agency, a governmental agency whose responsibility would be to engage in this on a systematic, regular basis with proper resources. And I just want to go through those. I appreciate the industry standard decisions and steps that you've taken in your companies. But it's not enough, and that's what I think you're hearing from my colleagues. Like, for instance, where there are layoffs in it is in the trust and verify programs. That's alarming because it looks like there is a reduction in emphasis on protecting things. Like, you just added, Ms. Yaccarino, 100 employees in Texas in this category. And how many did you have before?
The company is just coming through a significant restructuring. So we've increased the number of trust and safety employees and agents all over the world by at least 10% so far in the last 14 months. And we will continue to do so, specifically in Austin, Texas.
All right, Mr. Zuckerberg, my understanding is there have been layoffs in that area as well. There's added jobs there at Twitter, but at Meta, have there been reductions in that?
There have been across the board, not really focused on that area. I think our investment is relatively consistent over the last couple of years.
All right,
We invested almost $5 billion in this work last year, and I think this year will be on the same order of magnitude.
All right, and another question that's come up is when, to the horror of a user of any of your platforms, somebody has an image on there that's very compromising, often of a sexual nature. Is there any reason in the world why a person who wants to take that down can't have a very simple same-day response to have it taken down? I'll start with Twitter on that.
I'm sorry, Senator, I was taking notes. Could you repeat the question?
Well, there's a lot of examples of a young person finding out about an image that is of them and really compromises them and actually can create suicidal thoughts. And they want to call up or they want to send an email and say, take it down. I mean, why is it not possible for that to be responded to immediately?
Well, we all strive to take down any type of violative content or disturbing content immediately. At X, we have increased our
But
capabilities
shouldn't
with a
that be, shouldn't
two-step
that just be a
reporting
standard?
process.
If I'm a parent or I'm a kid and I want this down, shouldn't there be methods in place where it comes down? You can see what the image is.
Yes.
A
Mr. Zuckerberg, go ahead.
ecosystem-wide standard would improve and actually enhance the experience for users at all our platforms.
All right.
There actually is an organization that I think a number of the companies up here are a part of called Take It Down. It's some technology that we and a few others
All right,
built
so
that
you
basically-
all are in favor of that, because
Oh, yeah, this
that
already
is going to give
exists.
some peace of mind to people, all right? It really, really matters. I don't have that much time, so we've talked about the legislation, and Senator White House had asked you to get back with your position on Section 230, which I'll go to in a minute, but I would welcome each of you responding as to your company's position on the bills that are under consideration in this hearing. All right? I'm just asking you to do that. Third, the court. This big question of Section 230. And today, I'm pretty inspired by the presence of the parents who have turned their extraordinary grief into action and hope that other parents may not have to suffer what for them is a devastating, for everyone, a devastating loss. Senator Whitehouse asked you all to get back very concretely about Section 230 and your position on that. But it's an astonishing benefit that your industry has that no other industry has. They just don't have to worry about being held accountable in court if they're negligent. So you've got some explaining to do, and I'm just reinforcing Senator Whitehouse's request that you get back specifically about that. And then finally, I want to ask about this notion, this idea of a federal agency who's resourced and whose job is to be dealing with public interest matters that are really affected by big tech. It's extraordinary what has happened in our economy with technology, and your companies represent innovation and success. But just as when the railroads were ascendant and were in charge and ripping off farmers because of practices they were able to get away with, just as when Wall Street was flying high, but there was no one regulating blue sky laws, we now have a whole new world in the economy. And Mr. Zuckerberg, I remember you testifying in the Energy and Commerce Committee, and I asked you your position on the concept of a federal regulatory agency. My recollection is that you were positive about that. Is that still the case?
I think it could be a reasonable solution. There are obviously pros and cons to doing that versus through the normal, the current structure of having different regulatory agencies focused on specific issues.
Right.
But because a lot of the things trade off against each other, like one of the topics that we talked about today is encryption, and that's obviously really important for privacy and security.
Right.
But
Can we just go down
areas-
the line? I'm at the end,
Sure.
but thank you, Mr. Yaccarino.
Senator, I think the industry initiative to keep those conversations going would be something X would be very, very proactive about. If you think about our support of the Report Act, the SHIELD Act, the Stop CSAM Act, our support of the Project Safe Childhood
Okay.
Act, I think our intentions are clear to participate in
Mr.
the
Shu?
need here.
Yeah.
Senator, we support national privacy legislation, for example, so that sounds like a good idea. We just need to understand what it means.
All right. Mr. Spiegel?
Senator, we'll continue to work with your team, and we'd certainly be open to exploring the right regulatory body for big technology.
But the idea of a regulatory body is something that you can see has merit.
Yes, Senator.
And Mr. Sifrin?
Yeah, we're very open to working with you and our peers and anybody on helping make the internet a safer place. You know, I think you mentioned this is not a one platform problem.
Right.
So we do look to collaborate with other companies and with nonprofits in the government.
Okay.
to
I
make it
thank
safer
you
for
all.
everybody.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Welch. Well, we're going to conclude this hearing, and thank you all for coming today. You probably have your scorecard out there. You've met at least 20 members of this committee and have your own impressions of their questioning, their approach, and the like. But the one thing I want to make clear as chairman of this committee for the last 3 years is this was an extraordinary vote on an extraordinary issue a year ago. We passed 5 bills unanimously in this committee. You heard all the senators. Every spot on the political spectrum was covered. Every single senator voted unanimously in favor of the 5 pieces of legislation we've discussed today. It ought to tell everyone who follows Capitol Hill and Washington a pretty stark message. We get it, and we live it. As parents and grandparents, we know what our daughters and sons and others are going through. They cannot cope. They cannot handle this issue on their own. They're counting on us as much as they're counting on the industry to do the responsible thing. And some will leave with impressions of our witnesses and the companies they represent that you're right as an American citizen. But you ought to also leave with the determination to keep the spotlight on us to do something, not just to hold a hearing, bring out a good, strong crowd of supporters for change, but to get something done. No excuses. No excuses. We've got to bring this to a vote. What I found in my time in the House and the Senate is that's the moment of reckoning. Speeches notwithstanding, press releases and the like. The moment of reckoning is when we call a vote on these measures. It's time to do that. I don't believe there's ever been a moment in America's wonderful history when a business or industry has stepped up and said, regulate us, put some legal limits on us. Businesses exist by and large to be profitable. And I think that we got to get behind that and say profitability at what cost. Senator Kennedy, a Republican colleague, said, is our technology greater than our humanity? I think that is a fundamental question that he asked. What I would add to it, are our politics greater than technology? We're going to find out. I want to thank a few people before we close up here. I've got several staffers who worked so hard on this. Alexandra Gelber, thank you very much, Alexandra. Jeff Hansen, Scott Jorgensen. Last point I'll make, Mr. Zuckerberg, is just a little advice to you. I think your opening statement on mental health needs to be explained because I don't think it makes any sense. There is a parent in this room who's had a child that's gone through an emotional experience like this that wouldn't tell you and me they changed right in front of my eyes. They changed. They hold themselves up in their room. They no longer reached out to their friends. They lost all interest in school. These are mental health consequences that I think come with the abuse of this right to have access to this kind of technology. So I see my colleagues. You want to say a word?
I think it was a good hearing. I hope something positive comes from it. Thank you all for coming.
The hearing record is going to remain open for a week for statements, and questions may be submitted by senators by 5 p.m. on Wednesday. Once again, thanks to the witnesses for coming. The hearing stands adjourned.
Just keep it path here, folks. Good. Thank you. Watch your step here. Watch your step here. Just watch your step there.
Citron. My bill with Senator Cornyn, the SHIELD Act, includes a threat provision that would help protection and accountability for those that are threatened by these predators. Young kids get a picture, send it in, think they got a new girlfriend or a new boyfriend, ruins their life, or they think it's going to be ruined, and they kill themselves. So could you tell me why you're not supporting the SHIELD Act?
Senator, we think it's very important that teens have a safe experience on our platforms. I think that the portion to strengthen law enforcement's ability to investigate crimes against children and hold bad actors accountable is
So are you
incredible.
holding open that you may support it?
We very much would like to have conversations with you. We're open to discussing further. And we do welcome legislation and regulation. This is a very important issue for our country, and we've been prioritizing
Okay,
safety for
Thank
teens.
you. I'm much more interested in if you support it, because there's been so much talk at these hearings and popcorn throwing and the like, and I just want to get this stuff done. I'm so tired of this. It's been 28 years, since the internet. We haven't passed any of these bills because everyone's double talk. It's time to actually pass them. And the reason they haven't passed is because of the power of your company. So let's be really, really clear about that. So what you say matters. Your words matter. Mr. Chu, I'm a co-sponsor of Chair Durbin's Stop CSAM Act of 2023, along with Senator Hawley, who's the lead Republican, I believe, which, among other things, empowers victims by making it easier for them to ask tech companies to remove the material and related imagery from their platforms. Why would you not support this bill?
Senator, we largely support it. I think the spirit of it is very aligned with what we want to do. There are questions about implementation that I think companies like us and some other groups have, and we look forward to asking those. And of course, if this legislation is law, we will comply.
Mr. Spiegel, I know we talked ahead of time. I do appreciate your company's support for the Cooper Davis Act, which will finally, it's a bill with Senator Shaheen and Marshall, which will allow law enforcement to do more when it comes to fentanyl. I think you know what a problem this is. Devin Noring, teenager from Hastings, I mentioned his mom here, suffered dental pain and migraines, so he bought what he thought was a Percocet over Snap, but instead he bought a counterfeit drug laced with a lethal dose of fentanyl. As his mom, who's here with us today, said, all of the hopes and dreams we as parents had for Devin were erased in the blink of an eye, and no mom should have to bury their kid. Talk about why you support the Cooper Davis Act.
Senator, thank you. We strongly support the Cooper Davis Act, and we believe it will help DEA go after the cartels and get more dealers off the streets to save more lives.
Okay, are there others that support that bill on this? No, okay. Mr. Zuckerberg, in 2021, the Wall Street Journal reported on internal Meta research documents asking, why do we care about tweens? These were internal documents. I'm quoting the documents, and answering its own question by citing Meta internal emails. They are a valuable but untapped audience. At a commerce hearing, I'm also on that committee, I asked Meta's head of global safety why children aged 10 to 12 are so valuable to Meta. She responded, we do not knowingly attempt to recruit people who aren't old enough to use our apps. Well, when the 42 state attorneys general, Democrat and Republican, brought their case, they said this statement was inaccurate. Few examples. In 2021, she received an email, Ms. Davis, from Instagram's research director saying that Instagram is investing in experiencing targeting young age roughly 10 to 12. In a February 2021 instant message, one of your employees wrote that Meta is working to recruit Gen Alpha before they reach teenage years. A 2018 email that circulated inside Meta says that you were briefed that children under 13 will be critical for increasing the rate of acquisition when users turn 13. Explain that with what I heard at that testimony at the commerce hearing, that they weren't being targeted. And I just ask again, as the other witnesses were asked, why your company does not support the Stop CSAM Act or the SHIELD Act.
Sure, Senator, I'm happy to talk to both of those. We had discussions internally about whether we should build a kids version of Instagram, like the kids
remember
versions
that.
of YouTube
Yep.
and other services. We haven't actually moved forward with that, and we currently have no plans to do so. So I can't speak directly to the exact emails that you cited, but it sounds to me like they were deliberations around a project that people internally thought was important, and we didn't end up moving forward with.
Okay,
Sure.
but, and the bills, what
Yeah.
are you going to say about
So-
the two bills?
Sure. So
it-
overall, I mean, my position on the bills is I agree with the goal of all of them. There are most things that I agree with within them. There are specific things that I would probably do differently. We also have our own legislative proposal for what we think would be most effective in terms of helping the internet in the various companies give parents control over the experience. So I'm happy to go into the detail on any one of them, but ultimately, I mean, I think that this
I just, again, well, I think these parents will tell you that this stuff hasn't worked to just give parents control. They don't know what to do. It's very, very hard. And that's why we are coming up with other solutions that we think are much more helpful to law enforcement, but also this idea of finally getting something going on liability. Because I just believe with all the resources you have, that you actually would be able to do more than you're doing, or these parents would be sitting behind you right now in this Senate hearing room.
Thank you, Senator
Senator,
Klobuchar.
can I
Senator
speak to
Cor-
that? Or do you want me to come back later?
Please go ahead.
I don't think that parents should have to upload an ID or prove that they're the parent of a child in every single app that their children use. I think the right place to do this, and a place where it would be actually very easy for it to work, is within the app stores themselves, where my understanding is Apple and Google already, or at least Apple, already requires parental consent when a child does a payment within an app. So it should be pretty trivial to pass a law that requires them to make it so that parents have control anytime a child downloads an app and offers consent of that. And the research that we've done shows that the vast majority of parents want that. And I think that that's the type of legislation, in addition to some of the other ideas that you all have, that would make this a lot easier
Yeah.
for parents.
I just to be clear, I remember one mom telling me with all these things she could maybe do that she can't figure out. It's like a faucet overflowing in a sink and she's out there with a mop while her kids are getting addicted to more and more different apps and being exposed to material. We've got to make this simpler for parents so they can protect their kids. And I just don't think this is going to be the way to do it. I think the answer is what Senator Graham has been talking about, which is opening up the halls of the courtroom so that puts it on you guys to protect these parents and protect these kids. And then also to pass some of these laws that makes it easier for law enforcement.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. We're going to try to stick to the 7-minute rule. Didn't work very well, but I'll try to give additional time on the other side as well. Senator Cornyn.
There's no question that your platforms are very popular. But we know that while here in the United States, we have an open society and free exchange of information, that there are authoritarian governments, there are criminals who will use your platforms for the sale of drugs, for sex, for extortion, and the like. And Mr. Chu, I think your company is unique among the ones represented here today because of its ownership by ByteDance, a Chinese company. And I know there have been some steps that you've taken to wall off the data collected here in the United States. But the fact of the matter is that under Chinese law and Chinese national intelligence laws, all information accumulated by companies in the People's Republic of China are required to be shared with the Chinese intelligence services. ByteDance, the initial release of TikTok, I understand, was 2016. These efforts that you made with Oracle under the so-called Project Texas to wall off the US data was in 2021 and apparently allegedly fully walled off in March of 23. What happened to all of the data that TikTok collected before that?
Senator, thank you.
From American users.
Understand. TikTok is owned by ByteDance, which is majority owned by global investors, and we have 3 Americans on the board out of 5. You are right in pointing out that over the last 3 years, we have spent billions of dollars building out Project Texas, which is a plan that is unprecedented in our industry to firewall off protected US data from the rest of our staff.
And
I'm
asking about all of the data that you collected prior to that event.
Yes, Senator. We have started a data deletion plan. I talked about this a year ago. We have finished the first phase of data deletion through our data centers outside of the Oracle cloud infrastructure. And we're beginning phase 2, where we will not only delete from the data centers, we will hire a third party to verify that work. And then we will go into, for example, employees' working laptops to delete that as well.
Was all of the data collected by TikTok prior to Project Texas shared with the Chinese government pursuant to the national intelligence laws of that country?
Senator, we have not been asked for any data by the Chinese government, and we have never provided it.
Your company is unique again among the ones represented here today because you're currently undergoing review by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. Is that correct?
Senator, yes, there are ongoing discussions, and a lot of our Project Texas work is informed by the discussions with many agencies under the CFIUS umbrella.
Well, CFIUS is designed specifically to review foreign investments in the United States for national security risks, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
And your company is currently being reviewed by this interagency committee at the Treasury Department for potential national security risks.
Senator, this review is on a acquisition of Musically, which is an acquisition that was done many years ago.
I mean, is this a casual conversation, or are you actually providing information to the Treasury Department about how your platform operates for evaluating a potential national security risk?
Senator, it's been many years across two administrations and a lot of discussions around how our plans are, how our systems work. We have a lot of robust discussions about a lot of detail.
63% of teens, I understand, use TikTok. Does that sound about right?
Senator, I cannot verify that. We know we are popular amongst many age groups. The average age in the US today for our user base is over 30, but we're aware we are popular.
And you reside in Singapore with your family, correct?
Yes, I reside in Singapore and I work here in the United States as well.
And do your children have access to TikTok in Singapore?
Senator, if they lived in the United States, I will give them access to our under 13 experience. My children are below the age of 13.
My question is, in Singapore, do they have access to TikTok, or is that restricted by domestic law?
We do not have an under 13 experience in Singapore. We have that in the United States. Because we were deemed a mixed audience app, and we created under 13 experience in response to that.
A Wall Street Journal article published yesterday directly contradicts what your company has stated publicly. According to the journal, employees under the Project Texas say that U.S. user data, including user emails, birth date, IP addresses, continue to be shared with ByteDance staff, again, owned by a Chinese company. Do you dispute that?
Yes, Senator. There are many things about that article. They are inaccurate. Where it gets right is that this is a voluntary project that we built. We spent billions of dollars. There are thousands of employees involved, and it's very difficult because it's unprecedented.
Why is it important that the data collected from U.S. users be stored in the United States?
Senator, this was a project we built in response to some of the concerns that were raised by members of this committee and others.
And that was because of concerns that the data that was stored in China could be accessed by the Chinese Communist Party according to the national intelligence laws, correct?
Senator, we are not the only company that does business, that has Chinese employees, for example. We're not even the only company in this room that hires Chinese nationals. But in order to address some of these concerns, we have moved the data into the Oracle Cloud infrastructure. We built a 2,000-person team to oversee the management of the data based here. We walled it off from the rest of the organization, and then we open it up to third parties like Oracle, and we will onboard others to give them third-party validation. This is unprecedented access. I think we are unique in taking even more steps to protect user data in the United States.
Well, you've disputed the Wall Street Journal story published yesterday. Are you going to conduct any sort of investigation to see whether there's any truth to the allegations made in the article, or are you just going to dismiss them outright?
We're not going to dismiss them. So we have ongoing security inspections, not only by our own personnel, but also by third parties to ensure that the system is rigorous and robust. No system that any one of us can build is perfect. But what we need to do is to make sure that we are always improving it and testing it against bad people who may try to bypass it. And if anyone breaks our policies within our organization, we will take disciplinary action against them.
Thanks, Senator Cornyn. Senator Coons.
Thank you, Chairman Durbin. First, I'd like to start by thanking all the families that are here today, all the parents who are here because of a child they have lost, all the families that are here because you want us to see you and to know your concern. You have contacted each of us in our offices expressing your grief, your loss, your passion, and your concern. And the audience that is watching can't see this. They can see you, the witnesses from the companies, but this room is packed as far as the eye can see. And when this hearing began, many of you picked up and held pictures of your beloved and lost children. I benefit from and participate in social media, as do many members of the committee and our nation and our world. There are now a majority of people on earth participating in and in many ways benefiting from one of the platforms you have launched or you lead or you represent. And we have to recognize there are some real positives to social media. It has transformed modern life, but it has also had huge impacts on families, on children, on nations. And there's a whole series of bills championed by members of this committee that tries to deal with the trafficking in illicit drugs, the trafficking in illicit child sexual material, the things that are facilitated on your platforms that may lead to self-harm or suicide. So we've heard from several of the leaders on this committee, the chair and ranking and very talented and experienced senators. The frame that we are looking at this is consumer protection. When there is some new technology, we put in place regulations to make sure that it is not overly harmful. As my friend Senator Klobuchar pointed out, one door flew off of one plane, no one was hurt, and yet the entire Boeing fleet of that type of plane was grounded, and a federal fit-for-purpose agency did an immediate safety review. I'm going to point not to the other pieces of legislation that I think are urgent that we take up and pass, but to the core question of transparency. If you're a company manufacturing a product that is allegedly addictive and harmful, one of the first things we look to is safety information. We try to give our constituents, our consumers, warnings, labels that help them understand what are the consequences of this product and how to use it safely or not. As you've heard pointedly from some of my colleagues, if you sell an addictive, defective, harmful product in this country in violation of regulations and warnings, you get sued. And what is distinct about platforms as an industry is most of the families who are here because there were not sufficient warnings and they cannot effectively sue you. So let me dig in for a moment if I can, because each of your companies voluntarily discloses information about the content and the safety investments you make and the actions you take. There was a question pressed, I think it was by Senator Graham earlier, about TikTok. I believe, Mr. Chu, you said invest $2 billion in safety. My background memo said your global revenue is $85 billion. Mr. Zuckerberg, my background memo says you're investing $5 billion in safety in Meta, and your annual revenue is on the order of $116 billion. So what matters, you can hear some expressions from the parents in the audience, what matters is the relative numbers and the absolute numbers. Your data folks, if there's anybody in this world who understand data, it's you guys. So I want to walk through whether or not these voluntary measures of disclosure of content and harm are sufficient. Because I would argue we're here because they're not. Without better information, how can policymakers know whether the protections you've testified about, the new initiatives, the starting programs, the monitoring and the takedowns are actually working? How can we understand meaningfully how big these problems are without measuring and reporting data? Mr. Zuckerberg, your testimony referenced a National Academy of Sciences study that said at the population level, there is no proof about harm for mental health. Well, it may not be at the population level, but I'm looking at a room full of hundreds of parents who have lost children. And our challenge is to take the data and to make good decisions about protecting families and children from harm. So let me ask about what your companies do or don't report. And I'm going to particularly focus on your content policies around self-harm and suicide. And I'm just going to ask a series of yes or no questions. And what I'm getting at is, do you disclose enough? Mr. Zuckerberg, from your policies prohibiting content about suicide or self-harm, do you report an estimate of the total amount of content, not a percentage of the overall, not a prevalence number, but the total amount of content on your platform that violates this policy? And do you report the total number of views that self-harm or suicide promoting content that violates this policy gets on your platform?
Yes, Senator. We pioneered a quarterly reporting on our community standards enforcement across all these different categories of harmful content. We focus on prevalence, which you mentioned, because what we're focused on is what % of the content that we take down.
So,
are
Mr.
our systems
Zuckerberg, I'm going to
proactively
interrupt you, and
identifying.
you're very talented. I have very little time left. I'm trying to get an answer to a question, not as a percentage of the total, because remember, it's a huge number, so the percentage is small. But do you report the actual amount of content and the amount of views self-harm content received?
No, I believe we focus on prevalence.
Correct. You don't. Ms. Yaccarino, yes or no? You report it or you don't?
Senator, as a reminder, we have less than 1% of our users that are between the ages of 13 and 17.
Do you report
And
the absolute number
We
of how many
report the
images and
number
how
of
often viewed?
posts and accounts that we've taken down in 2023.
Yes.
We've taken over almost 1 million posts down that in regards to mental health and self-harm.
Mr. Chu, do you disclose the number of appearances of these types of content and how many are viewed before they're taken down?
Senator, we disclose the number we take down based on each category of violation and how many of that were taken down proactively before it was reported.
Mr. Spiegel?
Yes, Senator, we do disclose.
Mr. Citron?
Yes, we do.
So I've got 3 more questions I'd love to walk through if I had unlimited time. I will submit them for the record. The larger point is that platforms need to hand over more content about how the algorithms work, what the content does, and what the consequences are. Not at the aggregate, not at the population level, but the actual numbers of cases so we can understand the content. In closing, Mr. Chairman, I have a bipartisan bill, the Platform Accountability and Transparency Act, co-sponsored by Senators Cornyn, Klobuchar, Blumenthal on this committee and Senator Cassidy and others. It's in front of the Commerce Committee, not this committee. But it would set reasonable standards for disclosure and transparency to make sure that we're doing our jobs based on data. Yes, there's a lot of emotion in this field, understandably. But if we're going to legislate responsibly about the management of the content on your platforms, we need to have better data. Is there any one of you willing to say now that you support this bill? Mr. Chairman, let the record reflect a yawning silence from the leaders of the social media platforms. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Coons. We're on the first of 2 roll calls. And so please understand if some of the members leave and come back, it's no disrespect. They're doing their job. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tragically, survivors of sexual abuse are often repeatedly victimized and re-victimized over and over and over again by having non-consensual images of themselves on social media platforms. There's a NCMEC study that pointed out there was one instance of CSAM that reappeared more than 490,000 times after it had been reported. So we need tools in order to deal with this. We need, frankly, laws in order to mandate standards so that this doesn't happen, so that we have a systematic way of getting rid of this stuff. Because there is literally no plausible justification, no way of defending this. One tool, one that I think would be particularly effective, is a bill that I'll be introducing later today, and I invite all my committee members to join me. It's called the PROTECT Act. The PROTECT Act would, in pertinent part, require websites to verify age and verify that they've received consent of any and all individuals appearing on their site in pornographic images. And it also require platforms to have meaningful processes for an individual seeking to have images of him or herself removed in a timely manner. Ms. Yaccarino, based on your understanding of existing law, what might it take for a person to have those images removed, say from X?
Senator Lee, thank you. It sounds like what you're going to introduce into law in terms of ecosystem-wide and user consent sounds exactly like part of the philosophy of why we're supporting the SHIELD Act. And no one should have to endure non-consensual images being shared online.
Yep. And without that, without laws in place, and it's fantastic anytime a company, as you've described with yours, wants to take those steps, it's very helpful. It can take a lot longer than it should, and sometimes it does, to the point where somebody had images shared 490,000 times after it was reported to the authorities, and that's deeply concerning. But yes, the PROTECT Act would work in tandem with. It's a good complement to the SHIELD Act. Mr. Zuckerberg, let's turn to you next. As you know, I feel strongly about privacy and believe that one of the best protections for an individual's privacy online involves end-to-end encryption. We also know that a great deal of grooming and sharing of CSAM happens to occur on end-to-end encrypted systems. Tell me, does Meta allow juvenile accounts on its platforms to use encrypted messaging services within those apps?
Sorry, Senator, what do you mean juvenile?
Underage, people under 18.
Under 18. We allow people under the age of 18 to use WhatsApp, and we do allow that to be encrypted, yes.
Do you have a bottom level age at which they're not allowed to use it?
Yeah,
Can a child of any age?
I don't think we allow people under the age of 13.
Yep. What about you, Mr. Citron? On Discord, do you allow kids to have accounts to access encrypted messaging?
Discord is not allowed to be used by children under the age of 13, and we do not use end-to-end encryption for text messages. We believe that it's very important to be able to respond to well-formed law enforcement requests, and we're also working on proactively building technology. We're working with a nonprofit called Thorn to build a grooming classifier so that our Teen Safety Assist feature can actually identify these conversations if they might be happening, so we can intervene and give those teens tools to get out of that situation, or potentially even report those conversations and those people to law enforcement.
And encryption, as much as it can prove useful elsewhere, it can be harmful, especially if you're on a site where you know children are being groomed and exploited. If you allow children onto an end-to-end encryption enabled app, that can prove problematic. Now, let's go back to you for a moment, Mr. Zuckerberg. Instagram recently announced that it's going to restrict all teenagers from access to eating disorder material, suicidal ideation themed material, self-harm content, and that's fantastic. That's great. What's odd, what I'm trying to understand is why it is that Instagram is only restricting, it's restricting access to sexually explicit content, but only for teens ages 13 to 15. Why not restrict it for 16 and 17-year-olds as well?
Senator, my understanding is that we don't allow sexually explicit content on the service for people of any age.
How is that going?
You know, our prevalence metrics suggest that I think it's 99% or so of the content that we remove, we're able to identify automatically using AI systems. So I think that our efforts in this, while they're not perfect, I think are industry leading. The other thing that you asked about was self-harm content, which is what we recently restricted. And we made that shift. I think the state of the science is shifting a bit. Previously, we believed that when people were thinking about self-harm, it was important for them to be able to express that and get support. And now more of the thinking in the field is that it's just better to not show that content at all, which is why we recently moved to restrict that from showing up for those teens at all.
Okay, is there a way for parents to make a request on what their kid can see or not see on your sites?
There are a lot of parental controls. I'm not sure if I don't think that we currently have a control around topics. but we do allow parents to control the time that the children are on the site. And also, a lot of it is based on kind of monitoring and understanding what the teen's experience is. What they're interacting with,
Mr.
et cetera.
Citron, Discord allows pornography on its site. Now, reportedly, 17% of minors who use Discord have had online sexual interactions on your platform, 17%, and 10% have those interactions with someone that the minor believed to be an adult. Do you restrict minors from accessing Discord servers that host pornographic material on them?
Senator, yes, we do restrict minors from accessing content that is marked for adults. Discord also does not recommend content to people. Discord is a chat app. We do not have a feed or an algorithm that boosts content. So we allow adults to share content with other adults in adult labeled spaces, and we do not allow teens to access that content.
Okay. I see my time's expired. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. We are here in this hearing because as a collective, your platforms really suck at policing themselves. We hear about it here in Congress with fentanyl and other drug dealing facilitated across platforms. We see it and hear about it here in Congress with harassment and bullying that takes place across your platforms. We see it and hear about it here in Congress with respect to child pornography, sexploitation, and blackmail. And we are sick of it. It seems to me that there is a problem with accountability because these conditions continue to persist. In my view, Section 230, which provides immunity from lawsuit, is a very significant part of that problem. If you look at where bullies have been brought to heel recently, whether it's Dominion finally getting justice against Fox News after a long campaign to try to discredit the election equipment manufacturer, or whether it's the moms and dads of the Sandy Hook victims finally getting justice against InfoWars and its campaign of trying to get people to believe that the massacre of their children was a fake put on by them, or even now, more recently, with a writer getting a very significant judgment against Donald Trump after years of bullying and defamation. An honest courtroom has proven to be the place where these things get sorted out. And I'll just describe one case, if I may. It's called Doe versus Twitter. The plaintiff in that case was blackmailed in 2017 for sexually explicit photos and videos of himself, then aged 13 to 14. A compilation video of multiple CSAM videos surfaced on Twitter in 2019. A concerned citizen reported that video on December 25th, 2019, Christmas Day. Twitter took no action. The plaintiff, then a minor in high school in 2019, became aware of this video from his classmates in January of 2020. You're a high school kid, and suddenly there's that. That's a day that's hard to recover from. Ultimately, he became suicidal, He and his parents contacted law enforcement and Twitter to have these videos removed on January 21st and again on January 22nd of 2020. And Twitter ultimately took down the video on January 30th, 2020, once federal law enforcement got involved. That's a pretty foul set of facts. And when the family sued Twitter for all those months of refusing to take down the explicit video of this child, Twitter invoked Section 230. And the district court ruled that the claim was barred. There is nothing about that set of facts that tells me that Section 230 performed any public service in that regard. I would like to see very substantial adjustments to Section 230 so that the honest courtroom, which brought relief and justice to E. Jean Carroll after months of defamation, which brought silence, peace, and justice to the parents of the Sandy Hook children after months of defamation and bullying by InfoWars and Alex Jones, and which brought significant justice and an end to the campaign of defamation by Fox News to a little company that was busy just making election machines. So I would, my time is running out. I'll turn to, I guess Senator Cruz is next. But I would like to have each of your companies put in writing what exemptions from the protection of Section 230 you would be willing to accept, bearing in mind the fact situation in Doe versus Twitter, bearing in mind the enormous harm that was done to that young person and that family by the non-responsiveness of this enormous platform over months and months and months and months. Again, think of what it's like to be a high school kid and have that stuff up in the public domain and have the company that is holding it out there in the public domain react so disinterestedly. Okay? Will you put that down in writing for me? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses. Done. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Social media is a very powerful tool, but we're here because every parent I know, and I think every parent in America, is terrified about the garbage that is directed at our kids. I have 2 teenagers at home, and the phones they have are portals to predators, to viciousness, to bullying, to self-harm. And each of your companies could do a lot more to prevent it. Mr. Zuckerberg, in June of 2023, the Wall Street Journal reported that Instagram's recommendation systems were actively connecting pedophiles to accounts that were advertising the sale of child sexual abuse material. In many cases, those accounts appear to be run by underage children themselves, often using code words and emojis to advertise illicit material. In other cases, the accounts included indicia that the victim was being sex trafficked. Now, I know that Instagram has a team that works to prevent the abuse and exploitation of children online. But what was particularly concerning about the Wall Street Journal expose was the degree to which Instagram's own algorithm was promoting the discoverability of victims for pedophiles seeking child abuse material. In other words, this material wasn't just living on the dark corners of Instagram. Instagram was helping pedophiles find it by promoting graphic hashtags, including hashtag pedwhore and hashtag preteen sex to potential buyers. Instagram also displayed the following warning screen to individuals who were searching for child abuse material. These results may contain images of child sexual abuse. And then you gave users two choices: get resources or see results anyway. Mr. Zuckerberg, what the hell were you thinking?
All right, Senator. The basic science behind that is that when people are searching for something that is problematic, it's often helpful to, rather than just blocking it, to help direct them towards something that that could be helpful for getting them to get help.
In what,
And we
I
also-
understand get resources. In what sane universe is there a link for see results anyway?
Well, because we might be wrong. We try to trigger this warning, or we tried to, when we think that there's any chance that the results.
Okay, you might be
harmful.
wrong. Let me ask you, how many times was this warning screen displayed?
I don't know, but
You
if
don't
there's-
know.
if
Why
there's-
don't you know?
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. But
Well, you know what, Mr. Zuckerberg? It's interesting you say you don't know it off the top of your head, because I asked it in June of 2023 in an oversight letter, and your company refused to answer. Will you commit right now to within 5 days answering this question for this committee?
we'll follow up on that.
Is that a yes? Not a will follow up. I know how lawyers write statements saying we're not going to answer. Will you tell us how many times this warning screen was displayed? Yes or no?
Senator, I'll personally look into it. I'm not sure if we have.
Okay, so you're refusing to answer that. Let me ask you this. How many times did an Instagram user who got this warning that you're seeing images of child sexual abuse, how many times did that user click on see results anyway? I want to see that.
Senator, I'm not sure if we stored that, but I'll personally look into this and we'll follow up after.
And what follow-up did Instagram do when you have a potential pedophile clicking on, I'd like to see child porn? What did you do next when that happened?
Senator, I think that an important piece of context here is that any context that we think is child sexual
Mr. Zuckerberg,
abuse,
that's called a question. What did you do next when someone clicked? You may be getting child sexual abuse images and they click see results anyway. What was your next step? You said you might be wrong. Did anyone examine, was it in fact child sexual abuse material? Did anyone report that user? Did anyone go and try to protect that child? What did you do next?
Senator, we take down anything that we think is sexual abuse material on the service, and we do.
Did anyone
report to-
verify whether it was in fact child sexual abuse material?
Senator, I don't know if every single search result we're following up on, but
Did you report the people who wanted it?
Senator, do you want me to answer your?
Yeah, I want you to answer the question I'm asking. Did you report
time to
the
speak.
people who click see results anyway?
That's probably one of the factors that we use in reporting. And in general, we've reported more people and done more reports like this to NCMEC, the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, than any other company in the industry. We proactively go out of our way across our services to do this and have made, I think it's more than 26 million reports, which is more than the whole rest of the industry combined. So,
Mr.
I think that
Zuckerberg,
an
Mr.
allegation
Zuckerberg,
that
your
we don't take
company
this
and every
seriously-
social media company needs to do much more to protect children. All right, Mr. Chu, in the next couple of minutes I have, I want to turn to you. You're familiar with China's 2017 National Intelligence Law, which states, quote, all organizations and citizens shall support, assist, and cooperate with national intelligence efforts in accordance with the law and shall protect national intelligence work secrets they are aware of.
Yes, I'm familiar with this.
TikTok is owned by ByteDance. Is ByteDance subject to the law?
For the Chinese businesses that ByteDance owns, yes, it will be subject to this, but TikTok is not available in mainland China. And Senator, as we talked about in your office, we built Project Texas to put this out of reach.
So ByteDance is subject to the law. Now, under this law, which says shall protect national intelligence work secrets they are aware of, it compels people subject to the law to lie, to protect those secrets. Is that correct?
cannot comment on that. What I said again is that we have
Because
moved
you
it
have
out
to
of reach
protect those
this.
secrets?
No, Senator, TikTok is not available in mainland China. We have moved the data into an American cloud
TikTok
infrastructure.
is controlled by ByteDance, which is subject to this law. Now, you said earlier, you said, and I wrote this down, we have not been asked for any data by the Chinese government, and we have never provided it. I'm going to tell you, and I told this when you and I met last week in my office, I do not believe you. And I'll tell you, the American people don't either. If you look at what is on TikTok in China, you are promoting to kids science and math videos, educational videos, and you limit the amount of time kids can be on TikTok. In the United States, you are promoting to kids self-harm videos, and anti-Israel propaganda. Why is there such a dramatic difference?
Senator, that is just not accurate. There's
not a difference between what kids see in China and what kids see here?
Senator, TikTok is not available in China. It's a separate experience there. What I'm saying
But
is...
you have a company that is essentially the same, except it promotes beneficial materials instead of harmful materials.
That is not true. We have a lot of science and math content here on TikTok. There's so much of it that created a STEM feed for
Okay, let me
100 billion views.
point to this, Mr. Chu. There was a report recently that compared hashtags on Instagram to hashtags on TikTok, and what trended, and the differences were striking. So, for something like hashtag Taylor Swift or hashtag Trump, researchers found roughly 2 Instagram posts for every 1 on TikTok. That's not a dramatic difference. That difference jumps to 8 to 1 for the hashtag Uyghur. And it jumps to 30 to 1 for the hashtag Tibet. And it jumps to 57 to 1 to the hashtag Tiananmen Square. And it jumps to 174 to 1 for the hashtag Hong Kong protest. Why is it that on Instagram, people can put up a hashtag Hong Kong protest 174 times compared to TikTok? What censorship is TikTok doing at the request of the Chinese government?
None. Senator, that analysis is
explain that
flawed.
differential.
The analysis is flawed. It's been debunked by other external sources like the Cato Institute. Fundamentally, a few things happen here. Not all videos carry hashtags. That's the first thing. The second thing is that you cannot selectively choose a few words within a certain time
Why the
period.
difference between Taylor Swift and Tiananmen Square? What happened in Tiananmen Square?
Senator, there was a massive protest during that time. But what I'm trying to say is our users can freely come and post this
Why
content.
would there be no difference on Taylor Swift, or a minimal difference and a massive difference on Tiananmen Square or Hong Kong?
Senator, could you wrap up, please?
Senator, our algorithm does not suppress any content simply based on
To
this. It
answer that
doesn't.
question, why
Yeah.
is there a difference?
Like I said, I think this analysis is flawed. You're selectively choosing some words over some periods. We haven't been around as
There
long
is
as
an
other apps.
obvious difference. 174 to 1 for Hong Kong compared to Taylor Swift is dramatic.
Senator Blumenauer.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Zuckerberg,
Blumenthal, I'm sorry.
thank you.
I know both of them.
That was good enough. Mr. Zuckerberg, you know who Antigone Davis is, correct?
Yes.
She's one of your top leaders. In September of 2021, she was global head of safety, correct?
Yes.
And you know that she came before a subcommittee of the Commerce Committee that I chaired at the time, Subcommittee on Consumer Protection, correct?
Yes.
And she was testifying on behalf of Facebook, right?
Meta, but yes.
It was then Facebook, but Meta now. And she told us, and I'm quoting, Facebook is committed to building better products for young people and to doing everything we can to protect their privacy, safety, and well-being on our platforms. And she also said, kid safety is an area where, quote, we are investing heavily, end quote. We now know that statement was untrue. We know it from an internal email that we have received. It's an email written by Nick Clegg. You know who he is, correct?
Yes.
He was Meta's president of global affairs. And he wrote a memo to you, which you received, correct? It was written to you.
So I can't see the email, but sure, I'll assume that you got that correct.
And he summarized Facebook's problems. He said, quote, "We are not on track to succeed for our core well-being topics: problematic use, bullying and harassment, connections, and SSI, meaning suicidal self-injury." He said also in another memo, quote, "We need to do more and we are being held back by a lack of investment." This memo has the date of August 28th, just weeks before that testimony from Antigone Davis, correct?
Sorry, Senator, I'm not sure what the testimony was.
Well, those are the dates on the emails. Nick Clegg was asking you, pleading with you